That particular Sunday was a day of many Christmas parties, and I'm sure each was special in its own way. But as I sat in the small sanctuary of the Mikado Indian Mission Church, I found myself in a state of quiet awe. I was deeply moved by the faith of the people who were worshiping there, honoring the birth of a Savior who came from a culture and a race far removed from their own homeland. Mrs. Hazel Lavoie, whose roots are Native American, stood proudly at the altar, and she spoke of the history of this little church, of the Christmases that had been celebrated there for generations. Behind her was a lovely tree decorated with bright lights and colorful bulbs, and beneath its branches were brightly wrapped gifts for the children. But as Hazel explained, Christmas here had not always looked this way. She told us that when she was a girl, there was always a Christmas tree on the altar, but the gifts were very different. She remembered that there was venison beneath the tree along with canned blueberries hanging from the branches, and there was a rabbit already gutted hanging there as well, ready to be prepared for Christmas dinner. Hazel said her family was lucky that year her mother had found the rabbit. Since the church began back around 1865, there has almost always been a Christmas program there. Only on grim occasions did that tradition take a pause. Once during the outbreak of smallpox, and another time following World War I during the great and deadly influenza epidemic. Still, through hardship and loss, the people returned, and Christmas returned with them. Mrs. Lavoie then spoke proudly of her people's past and how they came to this place. Most of our people, she said, are of the Chippewa tribe. We belong to the Algonquin clan, and they all came from the East Coast. They moved west as settlers arrived and pushed them out. This, of course, is oral history passed down by word and memory. They came through Pennsylvania, then into the region of Ohio. Many eventually settled in what is now Michigan, drawn by the rivers and the forests, places rich with fish and game. To them, it must have felt like paradise. Hazel continued speaking of her own genealogy. Most of my ancestors came from a town about 10 miles east of Saginaw, Michigan, a place called Indiantown. That was where her mother, Stella Sogamendi, was born and raised. Some of the family later moved to Mount Pleasant, and others went to Sagining by Standish, and still others traveled further north to the area of Annette Lake, only miles from this little church. But they did not all stay. Many hunted and fished there, but without making it their permanent home. Behind the scenes, events were already beginning to unfold that would soon change the course of the northern Chippewa lives. This was the 1840s. Large-scale lumbering operations were beginning, and among the settlers was a man who was half Indian, knowledgeable, educated, and deeply influenced by Christianity. And he attended school and studied to become a minister. And at this school, he met and fell in love with a white girl from Boston society. And he asked her to marry him, and despite the objections of her parents, who did not want their daughter to go among the savages to live, as they called them, but they were married. Her name was Mary Henderson, and his name was Peter Saginaw. They came to Saginaw to live, and once there, they founded a little Methodist church. But tragedy soon followed. Peter fell sick and he died. There is a side story to this account that deserves to be told. Mary did not understand Indian tradition, and after her husband's death, his cousin brought her wood and fish to eat. She was confused by this gesture, but in Indian custom, this was a proposal of marriage, and accepting the gifts, she was accepting the proposal. In time, Mary did marry him. Mary went on to work with many hundreds of Indians, converting them from their old ways into the light of Christianity. There was a young man that she converted by the name of John Tudogson, who had relatives at the north end of Annette Lake. John went there, reached out to them, and converted a majority of them. And at that point in the story, the wandering ended. The people decided to settle down and establish a permanent church, and those who camped near Venetton Lake went out to search for a place to make their home. The land they chose is where the Mikado Indian Mission Church stands today. Mrs. Lavoie said this was around 1855. Now, from woodland beginnings, from a life of movement and survival, these people settled and practiced Christianity. And ever since, they have celebrated Christmas here at the Indian Mission Church with great joy indeed. As I sat there listening, I realized that this small church held far more than walls and wood. It held memory, loss, faith, endurance. Not the loud endurance of conquest or victory, but the quiet endurance of people who adapted, believed, and carried their faith forward through hardship and time. And on that Sunday, in that small sanctuary, Christmas was not just remembered, it was lived.